All right, well, thanks, Alan. So I'm going to go through EstateView here in a little more detail, and I might actually repeat some of the stuff that Alan said, but I just want to make sure that I cover all the details and everyone understands how this thing works, because it's a pretty neat little planning tool that you can use. So to start off here, you can just follow my cursor as I go through kind of some of the software. So you can see you can go in and you can actually put your firm name, the planner who's running the software, and then you can put the client's information in. So here we have, if you might recognize the name from the Thursday report, Mr. Colonel Sanders. We could put client's age, whether he's male or female, tobacco user. We can put in the amount of his annual or his lifetime gift exclusion that he's used. And the nice thing about this software is you can just click up and down and it'll insert those amounts, or you can actually manually type those in. And then another cool feature, it actually tells you, based on the client's age, what year they're projected to die. And you can actually, if you think they're going to outlive their life expectancy, increase that to their projected year of death or decrease that down below their projected year of death. But for this, scenario, we're just going to leave it as their actual projected year of death. Let me expand this out so you can see the client's names and other information that we're inputting here while we're going through the input screen. All right, so once you've entered in the husband's information, you can go to spouse number 2 or enter into the wife's information, and you can put her age in, female, whether she's used any of her lifetime exclusion, and it actually shows the actuarial death. And again, we can change this from male to female, and the actuarial year of death will change as well with that. All right, so a little bit about our scenario here. We're just going to assume that Mr. and Mrs. Colonel Sanders have around $15 million of investments, and they have a residence worth $1 million. So you can see where we put that information in here on the left. We have their personal residence and property with current value of $1 million. And we're going to assume that that residence is going to grow at a 3% rate, which is roughly the growth rate on property here in Florida over time. We have their investments and business value at $15 million. We're going to assume that this is going to grow annually at 7% per year, and they're going to pay around 1% in fees and taxes. And again, you can just click and move these things up and down if you want to enter into different, projections into your planning based on your client's, situation. The next column here, net yearly savings or amount spent while both are still alive. So you can, if your clients are big savers, you can say, okay, they're going to save $300,000 while they're both alive, and then after the first spouse dies, they might end up spending $50,000. But for simplicity here, we're just going to assume that they're going to break even and be not net savers or net spenders during their lifetimes. The next little box here is portability. So if portability ever goes away, you can just simply click this box, and it'll assume that there's no portability available. And that's kind of a useful planning tool too, if you're showing clients whether they should rely on, which is kind of covered here in the next column, a bypass trust or a credit shelter trust. It's really beneficial to go ahead and fund that bypass trust on the first death, because if the client ever remarries and the new spouse doesn't have any portability, and then you lose the former spouse's portability amount. So you can kind of show that to clients and what happens if you ever were to remarry. And here we have the bypass trust. I'll go ahead and go on to this planning scenario over here so you can see how this works. But yeah, we can click up and down whether we want to fully fund the bypass trust based on the exemption amount and available. And it's nice because it actually has an upper limit that you can get to, and it'll show you the amount that you can use to fully fund the trust based on when the client is expected to die and based on how much of their lifetime exclusion they're used. And we'll kind of go through that here in just a little minute when I cover things. So the next column here is the gifting. You can enter in whether clients are going to use gifting or not. So here in this scenario, to start, we're going to assume that they don't have a gifting trust currently in place. You can put the number of exempt gifts they can give per year. So we're going to assume that they have 3 kids, or maybe it might be 2 kids and a grandchild, something along that lines. But that's the number of people that they can gift to annually. So we can insert that information. This next column is kind of neat, the percentage of exempt gifts to gift trusts. So here you can input in the amount that you think the kids are maybe going to use out of the trust or save from the trust. So if you think they might use 50% of the money and save the other 50%, then you can insert that information, and that'll actually show what passes to the beneficiary at the end, and we'll kind of go through that here in a minute when I get over to these planning scenarios. All right, so next information that we can input is the life insurance information. So in this scenario here, we're kind of assuming that maybe Mr. Sanders bought himself a life insurance policy when he was 30 years old. It was a 30-year term policy, so he has 10 years remaining on that term policy with $1 million death benefit. And we can also say whether it's held in an ILET or whether it's just held by him individually and how that affects the planning. And you can also enter in the spouse's life insurance information. We're going to assume in this scenario the spouse doesn't have any life insurance. And you can also enter in second to die life insurance information and see how that affects the planning. Then we have information for installment sales, which we'll go through in a little bit. We also have a new feature in EstateView that we just added this week, which is assume the lifetime exemption drops 50% in 2026. Now, under the new estate tax law, the provision which basically doubles the exemption for clients who die after January 1, 2018, that's scheduled to sunset in 2026 because of the Brady rule. So there's a possibility that the estate tax exemption will be cut in half in 2026. So we want to have the ability to plan for that and see how that would affect our planning scenarios. So that's why we have this box here. We can put in the consumer price index growth rate, which is the rate of inflation that is used to project what the estate tax exemption might be and what it's going to increase to, and you can move that up and down. And we also have the ability to change the estate tax rate or use constant dollars and not worry about inflation. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit how EstateView can actually help you in your planning. So here we can say, okay, you have roughly $16 million in assets. You're under the estate tax exemption. There's nothing to worry about, right? Because we have $22 million that we can pass estate tax free. Well, let's just assume that you don't do anything and you die at your life expectancy, which we've put in here, which would be in 2037, say 20 years from now for the first spouse, and 2042 for the second spouse. So she would outlive her husband by 5 years. So if you don't do any planning, then we have a major estate tax problem, with assuming that your estate's going to grow by 6% and you're not going to spend anything from that estate. So what can we do? Well, we can say, what if you funded a bypass trust and used a bypass trust on the first death? That way you don't have to worry about portability, and the growth of this bypass trust will also be out of the estate, which is something that you don't get by just relying on portability. So we can see here that, okay, we save probably, between 9.2 and 6.5, roughly 3 million or so in estate tax by just using a bypass trust. But we still have a pretty big estate tax problem. So what else can clients do? Well, they can make annual gifts, right? Those 3 beneficiaries that they have. And this first, scenario assumes that they just make annual gifts of $15,000 each, so $30,000 for each beneficiary into the gifting trust. And you can see how that, helps, and it drops the estate tax down to 4.1 million. So we saved even more, and here you can also see out what that gift trust might grow to. On the first death, it's estimated in value to be around 2 million, and on the second death, it might all be up to 3 million, and you can see the total that you're passing to your beneficiaries using both the bypass trust and annual gifting to a gifting trust. Now, another thing that you might recommend to your clients is, well, let's put these investments into an LLC and then gift the LLC interest to the beneficiaries or to our gifting trust beneficiaries. That way we can take a discount on those. So you can see here that saves some more estate tax, and your gifting trust might be 4.3 since you can gift a little bit more than the $90,000 and take a discount on those gifts, and it's going to grow a little bit bigger. On to the next scenario here, we have life insurance and how that affects. It doesn't really affect our planning here because Colonel Sanders, he only has 10 years left on his life insurance for his term benefit, and that's going to expire in 2028 before his death, so it's not going to affect our estate tax. So another, since they still have an estate tax problem here with discounted gifting, we might recommend that they use this new exemption amount that was given to them by the new tax law and make a $5 million gift to their kids into the gifting trust, and voila, we've eliminated the estate tax just by making that gift. Now, you do have to adjust the exclusion. He's going to use $5 million of his gifting exclusion here to make this gift, so that's going to decrease his lifetime exclusion, and you can see that actually adjusts the amount that can pass into the bypass trust. So all is good, right? We've made a $5 million gift to our beneficiaries, and we don't have to worry about the estate tax. Well, not so fast, because again, as we mentioned earlier, this new estate tax law that increases the exemption to 11.2 for clients who die after January 1 of 2018 is scheduled to sunset in 2026. So if we say, okay, what happens if they don't pass an extension to this new law and the estate tax comes back to its current level? Well, we again now have an estate tax problem. So what's the next solution? What can we do now? Well, as I mentioned earlier, we have the ability here to illustrate an installment sale. And we can show the clients, okay, what level do we need to give to or sell to our beneficiaries using an installment sale to eliminate the estate tax. So we can actually go through here and just toggle up this installment sale calculator and determine what we need to give via an installment sale to eliminate the estate tax. So you can see here if they made a $5.7 million sale, so they would have to fund the trust with, let's call it $600,000, which would again decrease their exemption amount available, so you would have to adjust this as well. So now this is $5.6 million. And we can use a 35% discount, so the sale value after discount is roughly $3.7 million. It's a 2% note using the midterm AFR of 9 years. And you can see here that we have now eliminated the estate tax problem for these clients. Now, this is also neat because it can show what is available for Mr. and Mrs. Colonel Sanders during their lifetime, and to make sure that, Ms. Sanders is still going to have plenty of assets when she, when Mr. Sanders passes away, and you can, see how much is left in the bypass trust to use for her life, how much of investments she has remaining, what the investments will be at her death, the exclusion amount, what's remaining in the bypass trust, what the gifting trust plus the installment sale to this trust has grown to, and the total amount here that we're passing to the beneficiaries. So without having to walk clients through this whole EstateView issue, we can also, well, before I get to the client letter, which is what I was going to talk about, let's just go through some of these other tabs. So we also have, a timeline that shows how this might work, and you can see the estate tax owed if you just rely on annual gifting. If you just rely on a bypass trust, you can see the estate tax owed. And here you can see also where that exemption might drop in 2026 to half of the value. And you see if we turn that off, now we don't have an estate tax problem for annual gifting, but when we turn it back on, the estate tax comes back because of that drop in exemption in 2026. And then we can also show this in a spreadsheet format, which some clients like to see more than the charts, and just see a little more detail of the numbers. And then, you can go back to the flow chart and kind of chart format. All right, another tool that we've talked about a little bit is, making an installment sale to eliminate the estate tax. And this is another tool that we have. You can put in the client's initial assets, their annual savings, spending. I'll just decrease this down a little bit. Get their value of their estate, what they might pay in income tax, what your projected growth rate is, how much of their exclusion they've already used, and then you can just kind of play with the amount that's needed to sell to kind of eliminate the estate tax. And we have, let me make this bigger so people can see it. We have here what your estate tax liability would be depending on the amount of the sale, and it's adjusting. And just another tool to calculate what the estate tax liability might be based on different scenarios. And you can save these as screenshots to send to clients, so that way you can see all the detail, what the payments they might receive each year, the income tax that they're going to pay on the trust, and you can actually toggle on and off grantor trust status. Grantor trust status is, for those who might not be familiar, if you're taxed as a grantor trust, the income on the trust is actually paid by the grantor of the trust and not the beneficiaries. So that's what we like to call the grantor trust burn, and it can help reduce the client's estate by essentially making a tax-free gift to the trust and paying those taxes. But if some clients they get annoyed by the high income tax they're paying on this trust as it grows in value, and would like to turn that status off and have the kids pay their own taxes, or the trust pay the taxes if the income isn't distributed. So you can actually say, okay, in 10 years from now, I want to go ahead and turn that off and let my kids pay their own taxes, and you can adjust that there and see what effect that might have on the planning. Right, so now let's go back to the regular EstateView. Now that we've entered all this information, how are we going to communicate this to clients? Well, the nice thing is all you have to do is click Generate Client Letter. All right, so now we have this client letter up, and it goes through each of the kind of beginning. It goes through an explanation of how the estate tax works, and kind of details, how annual gifting works. If you go on down, it will talk about the assumptions that we made whenever we came up with our projections. So you can see the client's age, the tobacco users, the lifetime exemption used when we made the gifts, the current value of their property, the growth rate, what we thought the expenses might be each year. So life insurance information, what installment cell we used, the CPI index. So then it goes through each of the illustrations and talks about each one. If they did no planning and died in year 20 years from now and the spouse died in year 25, their estate tax is going to be $20 million. Talks about the use of the bypass trust and how this might help, and it saves them $600,000 in estate tax here in this scenario. We talked about annual gifting, kind of explains a little bit about how that might work, and then again shows the illustration, assuming they make $30,000 each, or I'm sorry, $15,000 each for $30,000 total for each kid, for a total of $90,000 in gifts each year to the gifting trust, along with an initial gift of $5 million. And we can see the estate tax savings there, and it also lists it in the actual letter. So combined savings, $9.7 million. Clients love to see big numbers like that in savings. Talked about discounted gifting, how taking a discount can save additional estate taxes. You can see the illustration there, how life insurance affects planning. And then we talk a little bit about how the installment cell might work and how that could potentially eliminate the estate tax. And then you can, this is completely edible if you want to, change some of the wording or take different, if they don't have life insurance, you might just delete this illustration. This is all part of EstateView and comes with the software. And, you can use it however you would like. So I think there's some more technical things that I might have left out. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Dave and let him show you how these technical things work, which I believe involve dragging and dropping some of these potential years of death in this. But I'll let Dave talk a little bit more about that, or Alan, you can discuss that. So thank you for your time, Alan.